Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Doing a little live streaming here, so going to do some Q&A. If anybody that's tuning in wants to ask any questions, this is a live stream of my 187-gallon reef tank. I'm broadcasting from my fish tank room on a snowy afternoon here in Vermont. What's up, David? Welcome to the live stream. Can you guys hear me okay? Is the audio good on this? Just checking some stuff here. Audio is good. Excellent. Green Mountain Coral. Hey, what's up, Eric? Thanks, David. Appreciate that. The tank's been doing really well lately, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm still battling a little cyano, but otherwise things are going really well, and I'm not that terribly concerned with cyano anyway. That's something that doesn't keep me up at night. Hey, Matt, what's up, man? Glad you guys are tuning in. I gotta swing by and say hello to you guys. It's been a while. But if anybody's got any questions, any things that you want to talk about, would love to answer your questions. It's been interesting with my tank. The end of this past year, God, probably December or something like that, I was having some really bad issues with the tank, and things were kind of going downhill really quickly, and I didn't know what was going on. So I had been doing some Triton tests, and what looked a little peculiar was the phosphates were kind of low, and I had been checking phosphates with my Hannah checker, and it seemed like they were okay, but obviously they weren't, because I did another Triton test, and the results for the phosphates came out really low. So I looked at a whole bunch of the other parameters, and really I think what I pegged it on was just very, very low phosphates. So I got myself a new phosphate test kit. I also changed salts, although I don't think that was the big reason why things seemed to turn around. And you know, back in early January, things did start to turn around. I did like a massive water change over 3 days, and seemed to do the trick. But I also started recently to dose phosphates to try to get those phosphates levels up. Initially, I thought it might have been lithium, high lithium levels, because in the Triton test, the lithium did come up pretty high. But I know there's been a lot of talk out there that really high lithium levels will not impact a reef tank in a negative way. So, and in fact, when I did another Triton test after the tank rebounded, the lithium levels were actually a little bit higher than the test I did back in the summertime when the tank was doing really well. So I don't think it was lithium. And anyway, it's been about 10, 11 months since I actually rebooted the entire tank. So for those of you who don't know, I took down my, I had the tank set up since the summer of 2015, and I started with dry rock, Marco dry rock, and I just was having one problem after another with this tank, and the big problem was dynos. So that just drove me crazy, and I just could not, no matter what I was trying to do, blackouts or peroxide or you name it, I was not able to beat those pests. I even tried the dirty method, so I added a lot of pods to the tank, and I tried to get the phosphate and the nitrate levels up, and it just didn't really work. So the corals were just suffering big time. I was getting a lot of losses, so I just decided the best thing to do would be just go for a clean slate. And I really wanted to start it off with live rock, have more biodiversity. And so I added Haitian live rock last May 2017. So I've just been very, very happy with the tank, since then, and it's been much better in terms of way things have been going. And right now, what I'm doing is I'm actually running the tank without a skimmer. So I'm going skimmerless, and I've been doing that for about the past 5 weeks. So so far so good. I run the arid algae reactor, and so that's been doing such a great job of pulling out nutrients and phosphates and nitrates that, like I mentioned, I have been dosing phosphates. I do dose nitrates. And, I think the skimmer was also kind of contributing to the very, very low phosphate levels. I run a Deltec skimmer. So I just decided to try to rely on the arid as a sole means of nutrient export to see how it goes. And like I mentioned, I've been getting a little cyano. I've had cyano in this tank for a while. And probably what's going to happen, I bet, once the weather starts getting warmer up here in Vermont, and the leaves start popping on the trees, and I start opening the windows down in the basement where the tank is, I think that's going to help a lot, because then that'll reduce the CO2, the carbon dioxide in the air surrounding the tank. For those of you that don't know, my sump and all the equipment is in the same room as my furnace. So I'm probably fairly certain that carbon dioxide is a little high in that room, and that's getting into the sump water, which is the sump is in that same room. Another reason why I think having the skimmer off is going to help, because the skimmer was basically acting to equalize the carbon dioxide in the air with the tank water. Anyway, enough about what's going on. So Felix, you're asking what lighting I'm using. This is old school metal halide lighting. So I run 400 watt. I've got two 400 watt radium bulbs over this tank. It's 5 foot long. And I also run T5, supplemental T5s, but the T5s are not on right now. David's got a question about his tenuous. What par levels would you recommend for them? Just received them from Aqua SD. Aqua SD, I love those guys. Actually, a lot of those LPS corals that you're seeing in the sand bed there are from Aqua SD. So I'm not a big, I don't have a par meter, and I couldn't tell you, but probably like in the 300 to 350 par range would be good for that Aquapora. That would be my recommendation. Speedy, thanks a lot, man. Yeah, the tank is definitely looking better, so I appreciate that. The halides I'm running from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 o'clock at night, so they're on for 8 hours every day, and I run the T5s an hour before and an hour afterwards. So 8 hours for the halides. What else can I tell you about this tank? Fish-wise, fish are doing pretty well in there. As you can see there, I've got 3 different tangs. I think each one of them has made an appearance. I've got a yellow tang, a purple tang, there's the yellow tang, and a sailfin tang. And I put all 3 of those in at the same time, and so far so good. They go at it a little bit, but they're pretty well behaved when they're around one another. I think it's a big enough tank where that'll be okay in the not too distant future. I also have a pair of clownfish. They're not sure that they're not Picasso clownfish, but anyway, they're not a mated pair, unfortunately, and I put them both in, and they haven't really paired up. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is get a breeder box to kind of have them hang out a little bit together for a week or two to hopefully get them to pair up. Yeah, Kitty, thanks. Those are so that bright one on the left is actually an alveopora, and or the green yellowish one is an alveopora. The red one is a gonipora. That's a an aquacultured one that I did get from Aqua SD, and you can't see it. I got another one in the tank. It's all the way on the right side of the tank, and that's another alveopora I got from Aqua SD, and I don't feed those things, so that's something that I know some people do feed their LPS, but what I do feed, some of the LPS like that Duncan you can see are some pellets from, what pellets do I use? I'll remember in a second. Felix, what depth of the tank and how high are the halides mounted on the surface? So the tank is 24 inches tall, and I got the halides about 8 inches off the top of the tank. Yeah, I've used Coral Frenzy in the past, that powder, but I feed the fish 4 times a day in terms of frozen food. I feed them the LRS food a couple of times a day, and then I feed some mysis cubes, and then I also feed what's it called, like marine. It's a combination of brine shrimp and mysis shrimp and a whole bunch of other good stuff. So I feed the fish a lot. I feed the tank pretty heavily, so I think that's why I can get away without having to feed the alveopora and the gonipora and the other LPS on a regular basis. Yeah, LRS is great. I also use the LRS herbivore, which my tangs love. And for some reason, I can't get those tangs to eat off of like a veggie clip. So feeding that LRS herbivore is definitely helped a lot. And all these fish are really fat and healthy, which is good. And I've also got, you've probably seen 2 masked Japanese swallowtail angelfish in there. I put 3 in, and so I put 3 females in, and there was one that was much bigger than the other 2. Well, a few months ago, the larger female essentially drove one of the smaller females into seclusion and chased the crap out of it, and basically killed it. So I only have 2 in there now, which I'm bummed out because my hope was that having a trio that the larger female would turn male. I'm still keeping my fingers crossed on that one. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it is aggressive to the smaller female. But it's not to the point where it's going to kill it. I don't think it wasn't like what was going on before. Do I feed my SPS? I do not. I do not feed the SPS. I believe in having a slightly dirty tank, and my tank I have my nitrates at about 10 parts per million, and my phosphates are now around the 0.05 to 0.08 range. So I think that really helps in terms of the health of the SPS and for polyp extension. I get pretty good polyp extension. But, really over the years, I've never really fed my SPS. Kitty's asking how often do I do the water changes. I do a water change. I've been back and forth on this. I try to do a 10% water change every other week, but now I'm doing more of like 7 to 8% every week. So it's something that I think is important that I need to do, since now I'm running the tank without a skimmer, and I don't want my nutrients to get much higher. And the way I'm controlling my nutrients right now is adjusting the light cycle on my arid algae reactor. So if you up the amount of time that LED light is on in the reactor, then it'll pull out more nutrients versus having it fewer hours. So right now I have it on for 14 hours. How long is Kitty? All right. How long has the system been running? And yeah, so the reboot on this tank, I started from scratch last May. So I started this tank. I took out the dry rock because I had the dinos, and I just it was a mess. All my corals were dying or were not looking good. So I rebooted it back in May, and I think I started adding fish and corals at the end of last May. So and I'm happy. You know, I think it takes 7 or 8 months before a tank really is ready to support SPS anyway. So I had a few losses early on. I tried some hardier SPS, and I lost a few. And then at the end of last year, I was just really running into this mysterious thing in terms of losing a lot of corals and things were not looking good. And that's when I think it was the low phosphates. So now with the low with the low phosphates, I've been concerned. I took the skimmer offline, and it's been offline about 5 weeks. Hey, thanks a lot, Kitty. Yeah, no, it's definitely looking good. I think the big sign for me is, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of sponges in my frag tank, and the frag tank right now is plumbed into the system, and I don't have the lights on in the frag tank right now because all I have is frags on in the display. So what I'm seeing is a lot of sponges in that frag tank, which I think is a really good thing. But what you can't see right now, unless I got really close up to a lot of these corals, you can maybe see it in some of these corals, is that they're all encrusting. So they're laying down that big base. And that's always a good sign because that means that these guys are getting ready to spread their wings. And so some of them have started shooting branches. But I'm getting mostly, encrusting frags right now. And that's always a good sign. In a tank like this. So certainly very happy. But, like I mentioned, there's always something going on in a reef tank that you could, hopefully try to improve upon. And the cyano is something that has been a bit of a thorn in my side. But I really believe that it's best not to overreact when you have a cyano problem. Back when I had my other tank, I had a really, really bad outbreak of cyano. And I used ChemiClean on it, and that's just something that it knocked it out, but it also I think really impacted the biological bed for that tank, and now I just really believe more about going the natural route. So if the cyano is an issue, then I just believe in trying to reduce the nutrients a little bit to try to manage that, and like I said, I think in the summertime, when we start getting better weather and some leaves on the trees, the carbon dioxide in the air, is going to go down, and I'm going to be opening up some windows here. So I think that's just going to help the situation. But I think the best course of action is just not to panic. I stir the sand bed pretty often because I'm getting most of the cyano on the sand bed. You could probably see there's a little cyano on that sand bed. So I think that's important to stir the sand bed. And somebody told me that it's actually not a bad thing. You kind of like you're replicating storm cycles on natural reefs by stirring the sand bed, and you have critters in the sand bed that are supposed to be doing that job. But heck, why not help them out a little bit? What else can I talk about? Does anybody have any questions? I could talk about some of the frags that you guys are seeing right there. The kind of hard to point this out without moving the camera around, but the bluish frag right center at the top of the reef, that's a Cali tort, and that's one of my favorite torts. And that thing is hopefully it's going to get nice and big. It's laying a nice base down. That's one of my favorite torts. It gets really blue and purple, and it's awesome. I also have an Oregon tort, kind of a little harder to see. It's on the left-hand side, the top of the reef. That's starting to encrust really well. I've got a little purple monster, Tyree purple monster frag behind that. Can't see that really at all. It's there though, and it's doing well. It's getting very purple. That frag in the front on the left-hand side that's really encrusted, that's got a couple of branches sticking out of it, that's the unique coral strawberry shortcake, that one that was introduced at MACNA. I think it was 2007. What else do I have in here? I got a Tyree pink lemonade. I've got some really cool millies. That probably my best millie right now in terms of growth with branches. The top left is the Aqua SD Rainbow Millie. And I got a couple of ORA Red Planets in there. What else do I have? Yeah, it's just a good representation. I've got some stuff from Cops, John Coppolino. So he's I got a couple of his pieces in there. So Kitty, you're asking, am I planning primarily SPS or staying with the mixed reef look? Yeah, I mean, pretty much what you see is what I'm going with. I've got, the LPS on the sand bed, and I've got a whole bunch of frags, probably 40 frags in total on the rocks that I'm just going to let grow. And I think the best thing for me is just to leave this tank alone and not really fuss with it too much, and just kind of let it grow in and look natural. That's what I've always found is the best thing to do, is try not to tinker with a reef tank and just let nature take its course. Yeah, what else can I tell you guys? Anybody else have any other questions? Just started the tank in January, yeah. What size tank do you have there, Kitty? Oh, what else can I tell you? Fish white, leopard wrasses. I love leopard wrasses. I got 3 of them in this tank. So I've got that African leopard wrasse that you can kind of see, the blue spotted one that's swimming around. I also have a black spotted leopard wrasse, and the one that just streaked across is my absolute favorite. It's a Chiote leopard wrasse. Those are really, really hard wrasses to keep. And geez, I got that one from Live Aquaria about 7 months ago. There he is, right in the front. And I got it from Live Aquaria, and the thing came in really skinny and did not eat for weeks. I mean, literally for weeks, would not take frozen food. So I thought he was a goner. I mean, he would pick at the rocks and pick at the sand, but it would not touch anything. So, expensive fish. But, I gave it a shot. Live Aquaria, the good thing is you got that 14-day guarantee. But, this thing went beyond that 14-day guarantee in terms of not eating. And I thought I was going to lose him. But then one day, I think what I did was I put some pods into the tank. So I put a whole bunch of pods, and I also bought some baby brined live baby brine shrimp. Let me spit that out. And so I put that in there as well. So maybe that got him or her going and on the feed. And from that point forward, it started taking other prepared foods, and now it is fat, knock on wood, and healthy, and doing really well, and very happy about that. Yep, no more dinos. No more. Thank God. Oh, David, thanks a lot, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. That took me three years to write that book, about 25 years of experience. But it took me about 3 years to write that book. If anybody is interested, you could just go to reefbum.com/book, I think it is. You can find it on my website, reefbum.com. And it's just really all the things that I've accumulated in terms of knowledge over the year, and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And there's a lot of things that I've run into that have made me a better reef keeper, especially with this tank. I don't know why, but it's with this tank, it's been a challenge, a lot more of a challenge with this tank versus other tanks. And I think one big reason why, for me, is I've been in the hobby for a very, very long time, and today the equipment is a lot more efficient than it was years ago. So protein skimmers and whatever reactors you might be using for filtration, sumps, everything is just so damn good in terms of what they're supposed to do that it's good at stripping the water clean. So I think that's an issue that the modern reef keeper today runs into, is that everything is so efficient on what it's supposed to do that it does too good of a job in terms of nutrient export and what have you, and you don't have enough biodiversity left in the tank for it really to thrive. So that's been an adjustment for me. Been an interesting adjustment. Anyway, so you got a 55 gallon, started with a 3 and then a 10. Yeah, that's how it happens, kitty. Years ago, I started with a 2-gallon tank in a New York City apartment, and that morphed into a 29-gallon freshwater planted tank, which I think turned into a 90-gallon reef tank, which was my first reef tank. And that was in New York City in an apartment. And then my wife and I moved to the suburbs, and I got my first, well, bigger. It was a 120-gallon tank, not much bigger than a 90-gallon, but it was like an in-wall tank. So that's kind of like how it all started. And then we moved from Westchester County in New York to Connecticut, and I really stepped it up and got a 225-gallon tank that was 6 foot long and 24 inches high and 30 inches wide. And then when I moved up to Vermont here, I stepped it down a notch and went down to a 187-gallon tank. So that was 1 foot shorter in terms of length. So it's a 5 foot long tank by 24 high by 30 wide. But it's a good size for me. I think one of the key things for me is the transportation of the tank itself and moving it into the house. And I think this 187 seemed a little bit more manageable than the 225-gallon tank. And yeah, if you guys are reading my book or whatnot, I tell the whole story about the moving the tank into this house up here in Vermont. It was during a snow/ice storm, so that was a real blast. Ooh, yeah, 55 gallons is a lot of water to drain out on the floor, so that's that probably was not too fun. Mauricio, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Which is your most resistant acro that could survive all of those changes you made? So that's an interesting question. When I was having the problems with my my tank at the end of last year and losing pieces, I pretty much lost half of the Acropora, the SPS in this tank that you're looking at here at the end of last year. I mean, things were just not doing well. But probably 15 pieces did survive. And I had a purple Slimer that survived. I had a forest fire Digi, and man, that was probably like a 3-inch piece that I had in there that was doing really well and crusting. It died back basically to a 1/4-inch nub, and that came back. You can't see it in this picture here, but now it's sprouting branches. It's probably about an inch, at least an inch high, maybe an inch and a half, and so that was a real hardy piece for me. That unique coral strawberry shortcake, that survived. That I was surprised that survived. I have another one that you can see right above that bright Alveopora, the green one. That's Battlecora Spainbow, I think it's called. Really cool piece, and that thing survived as well. And I don't know. So I had some really tough to keep Acropora that survived my near tank crash. So a lot of these pieces made it. You know, that bigger piece that you could see right above, well, next to that, in the middle of the tank, left-hand side, the reddish piece next to that green piece. That's an ORA red planet that survived. So yeah, I think I was very fortunate that you know, a lot of these pieces made it through. Yeah, I mean, there were some that for all intents and purposes I was ready to toss. I was ready to throw them out. So it's amazing how hardy these corals can be when things go south. But when things turn around, then they can really rebound very quickly. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind is if you're still you know, got a piece that's got some life left in it, still has a few polyps, you know, don't necessarily you know, throw it away. There's still a chance that it could rebound given the right conditions. What else can I tell you guys? Well, if there's no more questions, I'm gonna sign off here on this lovely Friday afternoon here in Vermont. I thank you guys for tuning in and for being engaged and asking some questions. Oh, we got somebody that just logged in. What's my best piece of advice? Sean, I guess is your first name. What's the best piece of advice about dosing? I'm dosing 2-part by hand when I return home from work. My best piece of advice would be to get yourself an automatic doser instead of trying to do it by hand. It all depends in terms of how much you're dosing, but you know, I would get an automatic doser, and always start on the low side in terms of the amount you're dosing. Do a lot of testing, and you know, I use ESV 2-part, so I go with the lowest amount that they're recommending to start off a tank, and then you know, just do your testing and to make sure that your calcium and alkalinity levels are in line in terms of where they should be. Hey David, thanks man for tuning in. Is Matt still there with you? Oh, I'm sorry, Eric and Matt, you're not with David. Anyway, thanks for tuning in there, David. All right, everybody. Hey, have a great weekend, and I'll do another live stream soon. This has been fun. Thanks a lot.